the taunting of Elijah, and actually kind of the taunting by Elijah. I'm sure Elijah was getting taunted also, but he was mostly the taunter in this particular passage, and really the doctrinal implications of that. Remember that he is taunting people who are not ignorant, right? I wouldn't suggest this, going into your using this as your evangelistic method, right? Going into people who are truly lost, tribal people, and saying, your gods are idiots. Are they on the potty? Have they ever answered a single prayer? Wouldn't do that, okay? So, but the strategy here is a little bit different, right? Because the 10 tribes of Israel are without excuse. There are not only Elijah, but we find out later there are 7,000 prophets in the northern kingdom of Israel that have not bowed the knee. They have made a choice to dedicate their lives and their worship and their sacrifices to a false god who has never done a lick for them. And so they need to be corrected. There's a little place for a little bit of doctrinal bullying here, yes? We don't like bullying, we don't like the word, but there is a place for the exertion of positive peer pressure with negative terms in life, is there not? Right? You avoid snowflake syndrome if you can adjust to this a little bit in your life. You shouldn't be cruel to people, but you do occasionally to say, hey, that is remarkably stupid, and you need to cut that out. And you can say that, especially if you know the people's background. That's what Elijah is doing. My God doesn't go to the bathroom, guys. Maybe you ought to switch. And so he zaps the whole altar, right? They dunked it in water twice, put the altar there, replaced Baal and Asherah's sacrificial time for the evening sacrifice. Totally just moved in on his territory here, and God responds. The soaked sacrifice obliterates even the rocks on the altar, which is a tremendous amount of fire being applied. So that brings us here down, right? He seized the prophet, or had the prophets of Baal seized, excuse me. So they seized them. Elijah brought them down to the brook. Why would you do that? Why would you do it in the middle of a drought? A brook that was actually flowing fresh water, maybe as a parable itself, right? Maybe simply because you don't want all that blood to be attracting flies everywhere, quite frankly. So he kills them all by the brook and allows their blood to run next to this brook. Why didn't he take all the prophets of Asherah? Why did he only do 450 prophets of Baal, but not? Why did the prophets of the Asherah get to run off? Anybody? Maybe a witness. I think Becky mentioned last week. Becky's here now, so I can. And she said that it was a lot of work to slay 450 prophets of Baal. It may have just been a physical conditioning issue. And we're talking about 850 people, right? 400 Asherah and 450 prophets of Baal. That's a lot of work. And I don't know, maybe he just considered the prophets of Baal the big problem. Anyway, so on the top here, he does that. He's unopposed. I think he personally slew them. I don't think there's a lot of delegation here. All right, this is kind of standing in the gap, same as Samuel did. You remember when Saul failed to kill Agag? Right? Was it Agag? It was Agag, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was Agag. Help me out here. Lots of evil kings. And Samuel comes up and grabs the sword and hacks him from stem to stern, so to speak. Right? To use a colloquialism without getting overly gross. Elijah is personally taking responsibility for this. And so Ahab, get how weird Ahab is. 450 prophets of Baal. One ticked off wicked wifey at home. He didn't want to go home. He wants to get snacks. After watching 450 prophets of Baal being slaughtered, right? Yeah. Go up, eat and drink. So Elijah told him there's a sound of a heavy shower. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. Weirdest thing ever. After a processing day, folks, you know what I don't feel like doing? Eating anything that had a face for a while. You know what I mean? Like I used to process sometimes 40 rabbits in a day when we had meat rabbits and a cow, 5 goats, 6 pigs, whatever. I just don't feel like eating that animal after I've done all that. You know what I mean? I don't feel like eating anything. But that's what he was told to do. And Elijah, remember, is the one that painted the target on his back, on his chest, and everywhere else when he said, it's going to be my word that causes this drought and famine, and it will be my word that stops it. So Ahab isn't all that concerned about the loss of the grifters that were the prophets of Baal. Remember that they were the ones that all ate at Jezebel's table, right? So that's, I mean, it was their meal ticket, and they would appoint anybody, warm body, to this position, the way I see it. Not terribly distraught at the loss. So Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he crouched down on the earth and put his face between his knees, resting. Your coach ever get mad at you when you did that? No? Y'all didn't have very old school coaches, I guess, right? When they pulls you out of the basketball game and you sit on the bench and you put your head down between your knees, you sit up. What do you think this is? You know, as if they found out later that's actually a great recovery position. But he didn't want you to look weak, right? Like kind of like the red coats. You know why the red coats wore red coats? When they get shot, you couldn't see the wound. Yeah, and they couldn't tell how many casualties they had caused unless the body hit the ground. So, same idea. He goes up. I think he's tired. Puts his face between his knees, and he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. So he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. Guys, you feel a little guilt here on Mother's Day? Tell your wife you can't find anything, find something in the house, and then she gets up, right? Go look again. What do? You go look again right away, don't you? You guys haven't been married very long, most of you. How many people would, I'm not even going to ask you that. I was about to ask how many of y'all were still in your honeymoon period. Gentlemen, you're all in your honeymoon period. Don't admit otherwise, okay? But it's going to happen that you're going to have fear struck into your mind and your emotions, your psyche, right? When your wife comes to look for something that she told you exactly where it was and you looked straight at it and you didn't see it. So it's going to happen. This is kind of the dynamic, right? I have my reasons, but I'm not going to justify my behavior today before you because I'm already not preaching a Mother's Day sermon on Mother's Day. All right, which I do. That's my thing, and I'll explain why. All right, later. But he said, I don't see anything. Well, go back, stupid. Oh, sorry, he didn't say stupid. Go back 7 times. Go back 7 times. What does that tell you? There's probably going to be 6 of those times you're still going to see nothing. Do what I say. Go back 7 times. So he went up and looked and said there's nothing there. It came about on the 7th time that he said, behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down so that the heavy shower does not stop you. Cloud this big. I'm from San Antonio. We either had 0 clouds or the whole region for counties was covered in flash flood causing. It was either dry as a bone, fire danger weather, or you were going to drown driving your truck through a low water crossing. We wouldn't have paid attention to a hand-sized cloud, wouldn't even know such a thing exists. You wouldn't even be looking that far for a cloud to look like a man's hand. And if you're Ahab and you've been, I mean, this whole situation he got into because he was out foraging with his servants trying to keep his horses alive, as I recall. And suddenly he's told, don't go now, get in your chariot and leave because there's going to be a flood. A heavy shower is going to stop you if you don't go now. So, seems incredulous, right? You would be incredulous after all of that. You don't expect, most of the time, right? You don't expect a drought to break that way necessarily. Or you wouldn't think that it was about to break simply because there was a cloud off and miles and miles and miles away. A little while, the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy shower, and Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And then the hand of Yahweh was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to Jezreel. There's a lot of If you pay attention, there's a good bit of outrunning people in the Bible. You remember the most famous one, right? There's jokes about it on the internet, pop up around every Easter. Peter talking to John, and they're sitting outside the tomb, and Peter says, "Don't you dare write that. Don't you write it. Don't you dare write it." And John says, and the prophet that Jesus loved, or the apostle that Jesus loved, beat Peter to the tomb because he was running faster or whatever than the old man Peter. Don't write it. Kind of wonder how that conversation went. Of course, legitimately, there was quite a bit of distance between the writing of that record and John, and the events that were in it. But anyway, still funny to think about. Elijah was able to outrun Ahab. Now, I don't know how good a shape Ahab was in, but he was in a chariot, so it really didn't matter, right? He outran a chariot, guys. And so I'll tell you, we had the privilege here at El Paso Bible Church of doing a premarital counseling class. We had 5. Do we have 5 couples, Danny? Were there 5 couples? 10 people. A year or 2 ago. Now was it? I guess it's sort of almost 2 years ago now. And as a side note, this was not part of the curriculum. I said, guys, you guys are young. You're still in school. You're going to get married. Probably the next few years, you're going to have some kids. I'm going to tell you that every single one of those events will put 25 pounds on if you're not careful. Every single one of them, 25 pounds on. You get married, 25 pounds. You get a new job, 25 pounds. You graduate from college, 25 pounds. You have a kid, 25 pounds. You have 4 kids, 25 pounds, 25 pounds, 25 pounds, 25 pounds. You got to fight it from the get-go. Because sometimes people who are serving the Lord need to outrun their enemies, right? You may not need to outrun a chariot, but you need to be able to stand up. And it's strenuous, right, to serve, especially in vocational ministry, but you all have, men, a ministry to your family, and you need to be able to fulfill that function physically. I'm not saying that people in, Bruce Baker recently went to be with the Lord. He, an acquaintance of mine, he had ALS for a long time, and the first time I met him, he was in a motorized wheelchair that he was able to operate just with his thumb. His whole body didn't work. And he was writing books, he was pastoring a church, he was doing all sorts. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but also that he had to work hard to even maintain that ability in that condition. Went to be with the Lord a few years ago now. Anyway, sometimes you have to outrun your enemies. He girded up his loins. I won't do the Pastor Joe Saul demonstration. One of the earliest things I remember, one of my earliest actual, structured Bible teachers was demonstrating what girding up your loins looked like. But I will take a victim to demonstrate it if you'd like. I can show you how to do it, but I'm not going to do it. Basically, everybody's wearing functionally a skirt, right, and a belt, and they grab it from the backside between their legs and pull it up and tuck it between their belt. You would not do this for a fashion show at all because it looks kind of silly, but it does gets the hem of your clothes out from under your sandals, right? Keeps you. This happens at weddings, right? People trip over their train or their dress going up the steps. They didn't think about that problem. Anyway, so he flees. Now Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel, remember, she's a true believer in her gods, right? So she sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me, and even more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." So the threat is real, right? Ahab, well, let's just say you probably know a husband like this, don't you? He needs action, so he goes to his wife. Right? Ahab's really kind of a pansy. He really is. And I'm not saying, ladies, you need to, women, wives, you need to be capable of action, right? But if your husband is incapable of action, you should hold your ground until he grows up a little bit, right? You should not create a situation in which you are an excuse for him not leading. Can I just say that? That works out different ways. There's complexities in there that I'm not going to address today. And obviously, these are wicked people. Ahab, but remember, Ahab was in receipt of a good promise. He did not have to behave this way. This wasn't God's determination that he do this. His line was promised, this house and a house of blessing. And then he married this woman. So she threatens him to take the life of a prophet. I've told you this before, that a lot of the Old Testament has in the meta narrative. You know, the meta narrative is there's the narrative that we're reading, right, and then there's the big picture that we put together, right. You're used to meta being what used to be called Facebook, right? Meta narrative, it's the unifying feature. Sometimes we say doctrine does this, and I will say that doctrine plays a part in that, but it is God's ultimate purpose as evidenced in each narrative, right? And so we have this polemic between Yahweh, the one true God, and the gods of the Canaanites, the gods of the ancient Near East. And whether you see it or not, Jezebel and Ahab and the people who worship those gods definitely see it. When they lost the battle, it was because their God had lost to the God of their enemies. By the way, that polemic still exists, right? You can understand that at least the informed fundamentalist and most militant forms of Islam view what is going on in the world this way. They still do it. Why do they do it? Because they're a medieval death cult. They have a very primitive religion, functionally, and I've told you before that there are ignorant Muslims, but for the most part, there's either honest ones that tell you that they want to kill you, and there are dishonest ones that won't tell you that they want to kill you. That's how it is. Ultimately, in the big picture, that's what we're dealing with. And they view the world this way. So she is now doing something, right, that actually Israel was told not to do, right? Your mommy probably told you that the Bible says not to curse. And what she meant was don't say 4-letter words for excrement. That your mommy was wrong. You shouldn't do that. You should obey your mommy. You should not say the coarse things like that, certainly. But that's not what cursing was in Scripture. It was that. It was putting yourself under a curse. May the gods do this or more to me if I don't make you like a dead corpse tomorrow, if I don't go and slaughter you by the brook. Guys, I don't do that because you're too dumb to do that, basically. You're too dumb to bind yourself to that kind of oath. You're going to do it unwisely, so just stop. And Jesus reiterates, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Simply do that. Don't bind yourself like this. And he was afraid and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. Illegal immigrant or something here, right? He just crossed the line into another nation without permission, right? It's God's land, right, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. He ran for his life. Now, last time we saw him run, he had supernatural abilities, right? He girded up his loins, outran Ahab to Jezreel. You think he was afraid? This is the first responder run, right? This is the guy running up the towers. Of course, some of y'all here weren't even born when 9/11 happened. Were you? Can you believe that, guys? Or were barely born. Yeah. This is the first responder run. Running towards your enemy, running towards the danger, running towards the lady that wants to kill you or the threat to your life, right? This is what happened. More akin to perhaps a mass shooting situation, right? Anyway, this time he's afraid. Did he have a reason to be afraid for his life? Different levels of that question, right? Pragmatically, did he have a reason to fear for his life? Yeah, there's this wicked witch. I mean, Jezebel basically means wicked witch of a woman these days, right? You don't find people named Jezebel. You might find a Delilah, which is weird to me, but not as weird as finding a Jezebel. You don't see Ahab except outside of literature, the famous one being Moby Dick, right? Captain Ahab, which is a parable into itself in the literature. Pragmatically, he does. He has, he just killed all of her lunch companions that ate at her table in the middle of a drought, in the middle of a famine. Highly offended her God, certainly. He does. Now, let me ask, though, a prophet that has just done this, does he have a reason for concern for his life in the land like that? I'm not sure. I mean, like, to me, it sounds like the people who are walking with the Lord faithfully have a reason to expect preservation in the land, certainly in obedience. We were talking about a guy who stood up right in the middle of a mountain, rebuilt an altar according to the law standards, and faced down 850 prophets and King Ahab himself and taunted them to their face and expected to walk away. And he really ran away towards Ahab's, to Jezreel, right? It's something to think about, right? Something to think about. What was he afraid for that he wasn't afraid for before? He faced off with all these prophets and Ahab on the mountain before. Maybe he did understand that Jezebel was actually the one that holds the reins of the monarchy, that she could bring something about that Ahab was too weak to do. Anyway, so he takes Beersheba, he leaves his servant there, but he went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die. This is not unusual for a prophet, apparently. Jonah does this, doesn't he? I'm going to wish I just let me die. Those bad people are getting grace. I might as well die. It wasn't impressive when Jonah did it. It's not really impressive when Elijah does it, frankly. So he goes off into the desert, a day's journey. So I'm going to sound really uncouth here for you. Y'all ever watch Nacho Libre? No. You've never watched Nacho Libre? How much of my illustrations will you not understand? That's okay. You're probably smarter than me. No, that's okay. It's a blackjack movie. It is lowbrow. But anyway, Nacho is the protagonist, the hero, wouldn't you say, of the movie, the hero. And he feels that he has to go off into the wilderness at one time in the movie. And he goes off and he, feels like he's living out in the desert, But basically what he's doing is like if I went out into our field over here and started a campfire. And his friend comes and finds him, and he says, and Nacho asks him, how'd you find me? I said, I saw you from the village. So Elijah's he didn't trek out 40 years distance into the wilderness, right? He's not the Israelites out of the wilderness. We're talking some miles into the wilderness, a day's journey into the wilderness. It's like when your 5-year-old, ever had a 5 or 6-year-old pack a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and take off down the block? Don't let them do that, by the way. I had one take off further than that. But and the world is not the same as it used to be. You get the picture here. He's afraid for his life. He leaves his servant. He doesn't want to be responsible. Sat down under a juniper tree. He wanted to die. It is enough now, O Yahweh, take my life, for I am not better than my father. It's enough. What do we learn? You're going to have bad days in ministry, probably. And your bad days don't negate your good days entirely, right? We judge people based on one day of failure a lot in life, or 1 month, or 1 year. And that should serve as a caution, right? That we can have great successes and fail shortly after. But it doesn't negate the impact or the benefit of it. And we tend to shoot our wounded, I guess is the phrase we used to say 25 years ago in seminary. That a momentary failure, we begin to treat people like trash that have called into question everything they've ever done, everything they've ever succeeded at. One bad, in church, often it's one bad business meeting, right? I still have people come up to me at our business meeting like, are you nervous? Never been nervous at any church business meeting in my life. I have met with one group of elders in New Braunfels that I was a little bit nervous about with good reason. But that wasn't a congregational meeting. When they tell you they're going to record you, it's usually not a good sign. It tells you you're dealing with immature people who happen to be 20 years older than you or more. And anyway, they were fools. Anyway, it is enough. Take my life. So is Elijah still a faithful prophet of God? Is he a faithful prophet of God in this moment? No, that's okay. We need to recognize that dynamic can happen. It's enough. Take my life. I'm done. He lay down and slept under a juniper tree, and behold, there was an angel touching him. There's more a scary phrase in Scripture. Can you imagine? What does everybody do when an angel comes up to them in Scripture? Absolutely freaks them the heck out, right? They are nuts at it. They fall down and worship, or they're scared to death, or whatever. Imagine waking up from a nap with an angel tapping you on the shoulder. Hey, buddy, wake up. There's all sorts of representations of angels. Now, if I were God, I would have a different sense of humor. I think this one probably looked like a human, but I would make it look like Ezekiel's vision of the angelic beings, right? That's what I would do. If I was going to wake up somebody from a nap, I was going to be artistic about it, right? All right. But he does. And the angel is simply there, arise and eat, he says to him. He looked, and behold, there was at his head a bread cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of Yahweh came again a second time and touched him and said, arise, eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. Believe we can say that this is God's recognition, certainly, also the angelic recognition. But understand, it's possible, there's two journeys that this could refer to, right? The journey that he had just taken, the one where he ran for his life down to Judah, or the one that he was about to take. I'm not sure that we have to separate it. But why was he overcome physically? Because he was afraid, right? And God's resolution was not to shoot the wounded, right? I mean, the joke is that God, Elijah gave up all hope for his life, and God said, take a nap and have a snack, right? And there's times where we just simply need to take care of our physical bodies, right, to recover from these things. And God recognizes that. So we need to be careful. I mean, God is gracious with us in our failure. I think of the parable, right, of fruitfulness that Jesus gives, that the branch that is fruitless, right, he lifts up, right? And the New King James, I think, gets this correct. Most translations do not. He lifts it up and causes it to be more fruitful. And so he doesn't strike down his own prophet. And he rose and ate and drank. Something serious nutrition here, right? Goes for 40 days and 40 nights without eating again. What's up, Bill? You okay with the question?
Hey, Ed just run a marathon.
No, I'm not saying, yeah, but there's a very pragmatic consideration, right? And so, the caution being in your life, right, that you may have a long run of really good, positive days where you've been faithful, where you serve the Lord, where you're doing the things that you need to do. How many days does it take to tear that down? One bad breakfast meeting will rip up a year's worth of progress in your mind if you're not careful. Yeah, Becky.
So I would like to propose.
Okay.
After that great victory, his expectations were, it's okay, we've taken care of it all. And then it didn't.
That's possible.
And I think
yes.
We can be that way too, where we think, okay, now everything's going to be great.
Yeah, certainly. You can observe that dynamic, right, all the way through, like in Matthew, right? Jesus has a few stinkers so far in Matthew, right? He has huge crowds following him. He's healing everybody that comes. He's doing all these great successes, right? And he's got these few stinkers, right? And you should expect, like as you're reading the narrative, that the trajectory would continue. That's a reasonable expectation, right? When you start an endeavor, you start a ministry, you start a business, you think that if I just keep doing these same things, generally speaking, the trajectory will stay the same. Life is not that simple. Ministry is not that simple. And we tend to think that we don't have opposition. Most of our opposition, guys, is ourselves, right? Most of our opposition in life, in ministry, in all of those things, actually ourselves. Once we get past the inability to take responsibility for our actions, we still have opposition though, right? That's a major sign of spiritual maturity, is a lot of deflection. You know, when you talk to somebody and you're like, hey, you need, I mean, big things. You need to stop cheating on your wife. Well, my wife cheated on me. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but your wife is accountable to the Lord, as are you, right? And you need to stop doing that. That is a major obstacle that you are throwing up for yourself in life. Once you overcome that habit of deflection in your spiritual life, though, the opposition doesn't stop. Then you engage with supernatural opposition, right? Then it's actually, you expect that the opposition gets worse, in my opinion. More powerful, more difficult. That's just basically learning how to walk. Yeah, and so I think he probably expected that he would, after a single-handed victory like that, Jezebel would fold and the whole thing would just come crashing down, right? He came to a cave and lodged there. Any other comments or questions, observations? This is a well-known story, I think, record. He came to a cave there and lodged there, and behold, the word of Yahweh came to him. And he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He didn't ask him that when he ran afraid for his life. I guess it was obvious what he was doing. He was afraid for his life. And he didn't want to be responsible for the life of his servant anymore. He left him in Judah. Here, what are you doing? This was after. This is 40 days later, 40 nights later, right? As I understand it. Maybe there's a complexity in here that I'm not reading into that. All that time later, right? Then he asked, what are you doing here? I've been very zealous for Yahweh, the God of hosts. What is he saying? I'm on the team with the biggest army. That's the God of hosts, the God of armies. Why am I alone in a cave? You know? I've been very zealous for Yahweh, the God of armies, for the sons of Israel. Northern kingdom have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. It's not the only example of depression, I think, that we see. I think this is probably close to clinical. I think John the Baptist is in the same position when he sends his messengers to Jesus and says, hey, are you the guy or not? Because I thought we had an army with this kingdom business. And why am I still in prison? Why am I facing a death penalty? Why am I subject to this? Why is John the Baptist the only one in prison for the sake of the Messiah at that point? You can understand the feeling. He was not the only one to ever suffer, but he was the forerunner in proclamation, but he was also the forerunner in suffering. Elijah is in the lead here, right? And we have, first to lead is the first to bleed, right? That's what we would say. In various contexts, we say it as pastors as well. We do. First to lead is first to bleed. And he's the one suffering first, but he's not alone. Not alone. He thinks he's alone, and he happens to be alone in a cave. Why is he alone in a cave? Because he ran. Because he found a cave that was empty and hid in it. Twice, actually. I mean, it was down under the juniper tree. He's run for his life. Now he's run because God gave him nutrition, but he's alone in a cave. Guys, a lot of times, if you don't want to be alone, stop going off by yourself. You know what I mean? I can't count the number of people who left the church over the years that I've been here who said that nobody cared about you or whatever, and we had no idea what was going on in their life. You know what I mean? They felt, I felt alone. Nobody knew more than your name. We didn't know your last name. You have no right to be ticked off. You didn't even give us. Why didn't you call me when my mom died? I didn't know your mom was alive. Unless your phone number, your contact information, email address, anything. Sorry. And you didn't tell me. Right? So if you don't want to be alone in life, don't run off by yourself in life. That's what the church is for. That's what the Cotter or the Catalog of Prophets was for. We find out. But they are seeking his life, and he had reason to be, I think, in a moment like this, fearful. That makes sense? All right. He's alone because he chose to be alone. So he said, go forth and stand on the mountain before Yahweh. And behold, Yahweh was passing by. I think the angel tapping you on the shoulder to wake you up from a nap is scary. Yahweh is passing you by, and a great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rock before Yahweh. But Yahweh was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. Yahweh's not in any of those things. We know Yahweh is passing by. Right? And this is a picture of your life, by the way. Right? The big things that draw your attention are not the places where God is necessarily working. The things that are going to cause you to fear in your life are not the things that God wants you to focus on, pay attention to. Lord is not in those things. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. It reminds me of what we all do. You know, Priscilla and I are from flash flood and tornado country. And the first thing you do when you get a text alert or you see on the TV that there's a flash flood in your zip code, you know what you do? You get in your truck and you drive down to the low water crossing to watch it. You're in Dallas, when the tail end of Tornado Alley, the sky turns pea green, and you start seeing funnel cloud lights starting to rotate. Go out and watch it. Close as you possibly can. I can outrun it, right? No problem. It may pick my truck up in half an hour, but I think I can beat it. Elijah goes out. There's an earthquake, a fire. The mountains are being destroyed by wind. Think about the fire had cooked the rocks into non-existence. Think about what kind of wind it takes. We get wind here, yes? Right? Think about wind that moves the landslides off the Franklin Mountains. That's kind of the picture, right? When Elijah heard, he wrapped his face in his mantle, went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I asked him again. Does Elijah know what? My question is, does Elijah actually know the answer to that question? He's giving an answer. He's given an answer. Right? When you interrogate your children, you'll ever interrogate your children? Don't lie to me. I'm your pastor. I know that you interrogate your children. Why do you ask the question over and over?
To get to the truth.
To get to the truth, even if you know the truth. Why do you do that? Because the child needs to acknowledge the truth. They may be lying. They may not be aware of the situation. They may be entirely justified in their own sight, but they need to know what has actually happened objectively. What are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah's scared to death. He hasn't actually eaten in 40 days, even though he has not failed in his nutrition for 40 days. He hasn't eaten or drunk for 40 days. Read it. In a unique situation. Well, he hasn't changed his answer, right? He said, "I have been very zealous for Yahweh, the God of armies, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away." Yahweh said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael king over Aram, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah you shall anoint as a prophet in your place. You have work to do. and you can't do it by yourself alone in a cave. So go to Damascus. Not exactly prophet of Yahweh Central. To this day, we could say, right? You don't hear about the First Baptist Church, the First Baptist mega church of Damascus, do you? Like, it's not really a church growth central, right? Doesn't happen. Go to Damascus, do these things. You've got some anointing to do. And it shall come about, the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Oh. Can you imagine? Don't you cringe, like as an American, as a Texan, when you're watching a movie and some slimeball monarch or pope has people kiss the ring? There's nothing that makes my internal redneck scream louder than watching that crap. I ain't gonna bow the knee. I sure ain't gonna kiss your knobby arthritic knuckle. Think about this. Baal. Nasty old fertility god who takes anybody who comes to be his prophet and priest, right? Any comers can be his prophet and priest. No selection necessary. Just get me some warm bodies. I'm going to go up and kiss this idol. I haven't bowed to Baal. 7,000. You're not alone unless you choose to be, Elijah. You're not alone unless you choose to be. So he departed from there and found Elisha the son of Shaphat while he was plowing with 12 pairs of oxen before him, and he with the 12th. And Elijah passed over to him and threw his mantle on him. Now, if you were smart, I'm just saying this facetiously, if you were smart, you'd throw the mantle back off. You know what Israel does to prophets, right? Elijah throws the mantle on his shoulders before he tells Elisha where he's been the last month and a half. If he told him exactly why God had him in that position to anoint him as prophet to follow him, he probably would not have taken the job, right? You ever taken a job you regretted? Yeah, happens. But I will note, we noted this with Saul also. You remember when we talked about Saul? When they wanted to anoint him, he was actually coming up plowing with oxen. When they anointed him, they found him. There's multiple times where Saul was already the anointed king of Israel and he was still plowing his own fields. It's just a different view of monarchy, a different view of kingship than what we have, right? Would you expect, King Charles, how many high expectations do you have of King Charles? I've never met anybody that had high expectations of King Charles. Talk about a warm body appointment. But one thing is, you wouldn't expect them, right, to be doing this, right? They get credit for some agricultural enticements and activities. Threw his mantle on him, but Elisha's out there plowing. Threw his mantle on him, and apparently he left, right? Because he left the oxen and had to run after Elijah. Elijah threw the mantle out the window, so to speak, right? As he was passing by, he is on his way to Damascus and threw the mantle on Elijah. He runs off. He left the oxen and ran after Elijah. He said, "Please let me kiss my father and my mother, then I will follow you." And he said, "Go back to him, for what have I done to, or go back again, for what have I done to you?" Sounds very similar, right, to Jesus' encounter, right? Let me go first bury my father. Let me go do these things. He says, "You're not worthy of the ministry that I have for you unless you're willing to forsake those things." Does it several times. Let me kiss my father and my mother. Everybody else is kissing Baal. He at least wants to kiss his mommy and his daddy. I think that's reasonable. Anyway, we'll continue on here. Any questions, comments, observations, accusations of heresy? Snide remarks?
I think what Becky was going on about.
Yeah.
It's all too familiar.
Oh yeah.
And having our expectations set up too high when we should give everything to the Lord and just continue to move forward.
Yep.
It's not the easiest stuff.
Yeah. We expect after a certain point, as I've said, we expect after a certain point that your trajectory becomes consistent and positive in your life, in your spiritual life. And I think that's not the same. Like John Piper once said, and I don't love John Piper. In fact, even his own buddies don't love John Piper. But he said something smart a few years ago. He's like, guys, if you hit 40, just keep in mind it gets better. It gets better. It's going to suck at 40. Just remember, it gets better, generally. That may be true in your life, but that's not necessarily true as far as your experience as your spiritual life, right? As you grow, actually, the hardest things that you will face spiritually will be at your most mature, most of the time, right? Most of it, again, is getting past your own foolishness and immaturity, getting past your opposition to yourself, giving in to your temptations. And when you start doing that, then most people never get past that, pragmatically. Most people never get past the opposition of their immaturity in their life, spiritually. But if you do that, then you get the real opposition. And it's not going to be just straight up positive progression. You're going to struggle, and you will fail, and you have to recover. The righteous fall 7 times and yet arise again, Proverbs says, right? I believe it's Proverbs. One of the wisdom literature books. So you never get past the expectation to experience struggle and failure and opposition. It just changes according to your capacity to deal with it. All right, anything else? We're way over now. I'm cutting into some donut time, seriously here. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word. We do